What is going on, guys? We are here. We are back. We are live for Dana White's Contender Series. This is episode number 8. And honestly, I can't believe that we're already towards the end of the season. It's always sad to see it go. I'm happy because it'll free up a little bit more time, but I'm always sad because this is my favorite time of the year, getting to talk Dana White's Contender Series. We've been pretty hot this season as well. So hopefully we'll keep that going for the last couple weeks of the season. Going to run through a quick live tonight. Usually we do these pre-recorded, but honestly, I was a little behind and just really lazy because I wanted to watch football and not spend my night doing a bunch of editing. So that's why you guys are getting the live tonight. But we're rocking with it. What's going on, guys, in the chat? Appreciate you joining. Yeah, so basically we'll get it started here. We do have odds, so we can kind of talk through some potential betting spots, some angles that I might be taking on the Contender Series card tomorrow night. We're going to get things started with the first fight of the night, which is Jacoby Smith versus Christian Savon. And Jacoby Smith now is a huge favorite, but I think it's warranted. This guy is honestly, I think, one of the best prospects of the season. He comes from a very high level wrestling background. He actually was an All-American Division I. He wrestled at Oklahoma State. Prior to that, he was a multiple time high school state champion, All-American, and he was a 2-time NJCAA champion in collegiate wrestling. So the dude can obviously wrestle. He's fought over in Fury FC, and he's won most of his fights by knockout. He's an 8-0 undefeated prospect. 6 of those wins have come by knockout. And it's not just the wrestling that he has in his back pocket, but his striking's pretty solid too. You know, he's got a very powerful overhand right that he tends to do most of his damage with. And I think that's going to be one of his big advantages here is the speed, the power, and the wrestling, because Savon, I really don't think is all that talented, to be honest. He hasn't fought anybody. The one time he fought somebody was Basil Hafez, who is a current UFC fighter, and Hafez dominated him in the grappling, submitted him inside the first round. This is another one of those Canadian guys, trains, I believe, with Pat Pitlick, who we saw earlier on Contender Series. Mike Malott, I know he's got some rounds in with, but he's one of those guys that it's like, yes, he's a fighter, but like, I think he's like a trainer too, or a nutritionist. Like, I don't think he's a real UFC level fighter. Now, that doesn't mean he can't win here, but I think it's a very tall task, especially when you're going up against Jacoby Smith, who, like I said, I think is one of the better prospects of the season. I just think he's got a very well-rounded game. I think the takedowns are going to be there. And even though Savon, his takedown defense and his sprawls were actually better than I expected, but he wasn't doing that against people with like legitimate level of wrestling, All-American wrestling like Jacoby Smith. And I think Smith has the power advantage on the feet too. So I think he's got multiple ways to win. He's a massive favorite, but no hot take here. I know we've seen some really big favorites lose this season, but I don't think Jacoby Smith's going to be one of them. So we're going to say it's Smith by TKO. That's the official pick, and he's going to get things rolling in the DGen parlay. Yeah, Dixon says, not going to lie, I'm tired of seeing Finny's mediocre fights on Dana White's Contender Series. Yeah, I don't blame you, man. Speaking of Torres Finny, that's the next fight we got here. Torres Finny is taking on, I got to check now. Oh, Abdullah Arami. This one is interesting because Finny, I think we can all agree, has underperformed, especially his last fight. Even the first fight. Like the first fight, honestly, I thought he should have got a contract for, just because the guy that he fought seemed like that was the side UFC kind of liked. And he did get the finish, even though it wasn't in super exciting style. He did end up getting the finish. So I thought he should have got a contract there. His last fight, though, I mean, total snooze fest. Let's be real. I'm a Finny fan, but I mean, that was just kind of pathetic, honestly. I don't think the guy that he fought was all that talented, but to his credit, the dude was very tall, decent striker, was just one of those guys you couldn't really look that good against unless you were like flat out KOing him. So Finny did what he had to do. He got the win, but it was just pure takedowns and just lay on him, not try to pass, not try to finish, not what Dana's looking for if you're trying to get a contract. So I think this time now his third fight on Contender Series. He fought last season and won, got a finish, no contract, fought this season and won. Just that boring decision, no contract as expected, but now they're giving him this final chance. And so what I expected going into this fight was, well, now they must be giving him some complete turbo bump to be like, okay, here's your softball to get a finish. But honestly, I don't think that's the case. Like Abdullah Arami is not a bad fighter. He's definitely got some striking in his game. He's got some power. And I think we've seen from Finny, yes, he's very explosive, all-American, collegiate wrestler, and football player, super athletic, super, just a tank of a man, going to pick his opponents up like a sack of potatoes. But Arami has big power. And we've seen Finny get really sloppy in the striking, and we've seen him hurt. I think in both of his Contender Series fights, at times he was hurt. So, I don't fully trust the durability of Finny. I don't fully trust the gas tank. But I do think the takedowns will be there. So it's one of those where I'm going to pick Finny, but at this number, like at plus 200, I'm not officially, I haven't bet anything yet, but I'm definitely tempted on taking the Arami dog shot at plus 200, or if we can find like a big KO prop, KO2 or something like that. I think that could be interesting at a pretty big number. But I am going to pick Finny here. It's just not with a ton of confidence. I do think the takedowns and potentially finding a finish on the mat is going to be live here. And I think he's got to sell out for it, man. This is his last shot to get a finish, to get the contract. So I'm going to root for Finny. I hope we see him do his thing on the mic after he gets a contract. But like I said, plus 200 range. I'm definitely tempted on the Arami side or chasing a knockout prop. It looks like BetMGM, if you can get down there, still has a plus 210, which looks to be a little bit stale. So yeah, that would be my lean in terms of an individual bet. But in terms of the DGen parlay, it's going to be Torres Finny in the second fight of the night. All right, moving on. We got the David Martinez, Xavier Franklin fight. And this one, I was very close, dangerously close to pulling the trigger on Franklin. And honestly, I should have now that the line has moved. It was like plus 165 on DraftKings. And I think on somewhere else, Pinnacle. No, Bovada actually still has a stale 160 if you have Bovada. But I think, and like now he's like plus 125 across the market. So the line has certainly tightened up here. And I think that line movement is correct. We'll start on the Martinez side. This is a guy who's a high level striker, 3-time world champion or world games kickboxing champion, and the former Combate global bantamweight champion. And he is a very decorated striker. That is basically all that he's looking to do. He's got really nasty head kicks that he'll look for in all of his fights. He hasn't really faced super high level competition, so that is a little bit concerning, but the striking is certainly there. The power is there as well. Even though sometimes it looks like it's a little bit wonky, the dude's super clean, super powerful, super reckless at times, I think, though. And I think he's very one-dimensional. And I think that's where I did have interest in the Franklin side, and I did pick Franklin to win for what it's worth, because Xavier Franklin, despite being a little bit undersized for the division, his last fight, he fought this dude that was tall for the division, and him only being like 5'6", it looked like the dude was twice his size. But he's very used to closing the distance. He's got solid striking. What he lacks in size, he makes up for in speed and power. And he's got a pretty well-rounded skill set too. He's capable of landing takedowns. He's got a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So it's one of those fights where I see it being pretty competitive. And even though I think Martinez is the cleaner striker and maybe he's able to land a big head kick or something, outside of that, I think Franklin's going to be super competitive here and force Martinez to grapple. And I think that could end up being the difference. So I'm actually picking Franklin by decision as the official pick. That's going to be the first dog shot. But again, I wish I got in earlier. I'm probably not going to make him an individual play now at plus 120 or whatever, unless it looks like somebody said FanDuel Tyler in the chat said FanDuel has a plus 150. So I might take some of that later tonight after I get off this stream. But I do think he's the side. I just probably wouldn't play it where it's at now. In terms of the DGen parlay, he is going to be the pick. And I like this fight to get extended. So even if you don't end up getting on a money line side, I think overs could potentially be pretty good here, or even a GTD. I think this one hits the judges' scorecards. All right, next fight. We got 2 fights left. We got the Alberto Montes fight, and he's fighting Carlos Calderon. Montes, so this one, Montes was actually originally scheduled to fight Robbie Ring. And we saw, you guys recognize that name because Robbie Ring he fought on last season of Contender Series, and he fought Luis Puello, and he was priced as a favorite in that fight. You guys know we were on Puello pretty big there. Thought Robbie Ring was a big time fraud, and it ended up playing out perfectly. So I was getting excited. I thought maybe we'd have a chance to fade Robbie Ring again because I think Montes is pretty solid, but he ended up getting replaced here by Carlos Calderon, who honestly I don't think is very good. We'll go ahead and start on the Montes side. He's currently like a minus 250, minus 270 on DraftKings. And I think that's probably right. Maybe you can make a case that it's a little bit wide, but I think Montes is clearly the A side in this matchup. I think he's clearly the better fighter. Like I said, they were bringing him on originally to fight Robbie Ring. I think that was a showcase fight for him. And then I think them bringing Calderon in, I think it's still a showcase spot for him. And he's just going to be the better striker here. He's another former Combate Global featherweight champion. Previously fought at bantamweight. He's kind of shifted back between 145 and 135. He was actually brutally knocked out in his only professional loss. That fight was at 135. Since then, he hasn't gone back down to bantamweight. So I'm not super concerned about the durability because at 145, hopefully it's a little bit better. And the dude just completely caught him with a perfect right hand. So I'm not going to knock him too much for that. On the feet, he's another one of those guys that's very active with the kicking attack. Question mark kicks, spinning back kicks, spinning wheel kicks. He's going to look for them. The things I don't like about him is that he can give up takedowns. I think he could be controlled along the fence. He could be controlled on the mat as well by better grapplers. But one of his best weapons is his front choke series. He's got a very wicked dart choke. He's just very educated in terms of when to snatch up the neck. And I think that just makes him one of those dual threat guys that are tough to deal with because he's got the power in his striking, but you look at his record, most of his wins have actually come by submission. It's because he's hurting guys in the striking and then real quickly snatching up the neck. So this is one where I think he's going to have multiple advantages because Carlos Calderon, he trains at Elevation Fight Team. He's 6-2 or 8-2 prospect. I just don't think he's very good, honestly. He made his LFA debut his last fight, and the dude he fought was not very good. He ended up submitting him in the first round, but you watch the fight, and like he gets dropped and almost finished like immediately in that fight. He's one of those guys that he can fight from both stances pretty comfortably. He fights with his hands down, though, and he does get tagged. He does get rocked, like I mentioned in that last fight, but you also saw him tagged in previous regional fights as well. So this is one where I think Montes just has multiple ways to win. I think he could land one of those big head kicks. I think he could hurt Calderon on the feet, but I also think Calderon, we saw his last fight. What did he do when he got hurt? He went in on a desperate takedown. If he does that here, Montes is way too good at snatching up the neck, and I think that's what's going to happen here. So the official pick is going to be Montes by decision. Hopefully we get a playable number on that submission prop. I don't think there's any props out yet. But I'll definitely be looking to target submission angles for Montes, and he's going to be the 4th pick in the DGen parlay. Yeah, Dixon says if you want to shop for a better line, I'd recommend Fight Numbers. Absolutely. Great plug there. Fightnumbers.com, exclusive odds screen. And we do have Contender Series as well. So definitely check that out. Of course, we got the new betting trends tool, the controversial trends tool. Honestly, whether you guys think it's super useful or not, I just think it's great data to have. Like I talked about last week, people always say bet the underdog in women's MMA. And honestly, over the last 2 years, it's been a pretty losing strategy to do that. So it's nice to kind of, people like to say things, but it's nice to actually put data and numbers to what people are saying and find out what's true and what's not. The other day, I was actually looking in there, trying to uncover some new different type of trends that people don't really reference and stuff like that. And I actually, I uncovered, I think, an interesting nugget, and it's something that I'm definitely going to keep following to see if it kind of holds more weight. But over the last 2 years, basically, there's like a drastic drop off in WMMA when fighters are making are not staying active. So if they've been on a layoff for 6 months or longer, it basically the data says they do not do well, and it's completely worse than as opposed to the men's division. So I don't know if there's like something scientific there between females and males, but whenever WMMA fighters are making coming off a longer layoff, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but it's like wild. And then you look at the trends from 6 months or less, or 3 months or less. Like I ran a bunch of different ones, and it's like super profitable to bet on women fighters making a quick turn, whether they're a favorite or an underdog. Favorites are even stronger, but both are profitable. And then you go past the 6 month layoff, and it's like, I mean, wildly losing strategy. Like it's very alarming, the difference between the two. So like I said, it's something that I'm definitely going to monitor. But yeah, it's just one of those things where I was like, because people always talk about like, oh, well, he's making a quick turnaround or she's making a quick turnaround. And so it's interesting for me to be like, well, does that actually have any type of effect? Is it positive? Is it negative? And like I said, I ran through a bunch of different scenarios, and the biggest takeaway was that 6 month mark for WMMA, where it just really, I mean, everything's profitable, and then it just tanks anything after 6 months. And it's actually a fairly large sample size too. I'll probably end up tweeting that out at some point this week. But yeah, really cool stuff there. Part of the betting package over at fightnumbers.com. I'll get back to Dana White's Contender Series. That's what you guys are here for. Last fight of the night, main event. We got Dayar Nurgaze versus Bartosz Zuzik, I think is how you say it. Currently, we have Nurgaze minus 130 favorite. Zuzik is plus 100 on DraftKings. And excuse me. And this one, I get why people were taking the dog shot on Zuzik here. The line certainly closed up a little bit, but I'm on the other side here, and I don't know if I'll get to a bet. I am leaning that way, and if the line keeps coming in, I'm probably gonna end up betting him. It's one of those like sloppy light heavyweight fights that I think could be competitive, but I think Nurgaze checks a lot of boxes, especially on a low-level Contender Series card, because, I mean, you look at his career, first of all, he's fought good competition. He's got a win over Magomed Magomedov. He's the Eagle FC light heavyweight champion. He's fought his last fight against the dude that fought in PFL. He's fought a couple guys that fought in PFL. And honestly, like, he's one of those fighters, it's not super pretty when he fights. Like, he's not going to blow you away. He's not going to blow you away physically. His tape is not going to blow you away, but he's just very solid. Like, he's very well-rounded. On the feet, he's a comfortable striker, not a ton of power, but he moves well for his size. He's active with the leg kicks, and he's just very patient. He's not going to take a ton of risk. And then he's actually got a pretty solid ground game as well. He can land takedowns. He's a good grappler. He actually competes in some grappling tournaments. He's 9-0 undefeated prospect fighting out of Kazakhstan. And like I said, I mean, I talked about the level of competition. He's been tested over 25 minutes. The cardio checks out as well. He's got a solid ground game. His striking's not bad. And even though he doesn't like blow you away in any of those areas, I do think he's just pretty well-rounded. And on the flip side, Bartosz Zuzik is going to be a little bit bigger. I think he's going to have the power advantage. Most of his wins have come by knockout. He's the former light heavyweight champion over in Fenn, which is the promotion that brought us Mateusz Rambowski on Contender Series, who's now made a name for himself in the UFC. So his level of competition's not bad either. It's not to the level of Nergaze, but it's not bad. But he does have some pretty poor losses on his record. He's also gassed in fights. I don't trust the cardio. I don't really trust the defensive grappling either. And that's one thing that I'll say about Nergaze is like, he didn't use it in his last fight. But like the fight before that, the 5-rounder, he went to his ground game pretty much every single round and just dominated his opponent on the mat. Like, I think if he does that here and gets Zuzic down, I think that's what this fight's going to look like. So I just think he's got most of the upside here. Like, outside of somebody just hurting someone in a high variance exchange on the feet, I think Nergaze has more of the round winning upside. So for that reason, like I said, I'm tempted on getting to a bet here. And now there's some minus 120s out there. Like I said, if the line keeps coming in, I'm certainly going to end up on the Nergaze side. He's going to be the pick for the DGen parlay. Nergaze by decision. This is another one. I like overs this week, guys, which is always, it never feels great on contenders, and we've been burned on a couple overs this season, but I feel like we see a couple decisions on this card. Maybe that ends up being a bad take, but this could be one of them in the main event here. So we're going with Nergaze. That's going to do it. 5 fights. Quick recap for the DGen parlay. First fight of the night, we got my guy, Jacoby Smith. I think he's one of the better prospects this season. I think he dominates this Canadian wannabe fighter. Smith beats him anywhere the fight goes. Smith by TKO in the first fight. In the second fight, that is let me make sure I have my order right. That's that's Torres Finny and Abdullah Arami. Arami, where it's at now, plus 200 range, I think he's the betting side. But in terms of the parlay, we're going to go with Finny here. I think he could potentially get clipped, but I'm still kind of putting some faith in him here to get the takedowns and hopefully get a finish and get a contract. But that might be one where I look for some type of prop angle on Arami. I just think the line's a little bit wide. Finny's the pick for the parlay. David Martinez, Xavier Franklin, the lines come in, so you're not getting as much value, but I do think the well-roundedness of Franklin could end up being the difference. Hopefully he looks to grapple, and Franklin by decision. I like some overs in that fight. Calderon, Montes, this is probably my most confident pick outside of Smith. I mean, he's super juiced, but relative to the odds, I like Montes. I like him quite a bit here. I'm going to be looking for some type of submission angle. That front choke series that he has, I think is going to be a factor here. He can also land a big kick on the feet as well. Calderon just has no defense in the striking. So I like Montes to get a finish. And then in the main event, I mentioned it's close to a pick 'em now. I might end up on the Nergaze side, and he's going to be the pick. This is another one I kind of like overs, but that's going to do it, guys. Appreciate you joining. Best of luck. I'm going to get back to watching football. We'll see you guys next week.